It was a beautiful day, one of those crisp mornings that promises a perfect celebration. I had polished my shoes, donned my best suit, and even added a small boutonniere Karen insisted matched her sister Lisa's wedding theme. This was a big day for her family, and while I wasn't particularly close to Lisa, I was there to support Karen. When I arrived at the grand venue, a sprawling estate buzzing with guests dressed to impress, my excitement was tempered by a creeping unease. I was proud to stand beside Karen, even if her family treated me like an outsider more often than not. Today, I told myself, was about celebrating love. I approached the entrance confidently, nodding to the security guard at the door as I handed over my invitation. He glanced at it, then at me, and frowned. "Your name isn't on the list," he said flatly. I blinked. "That can't be right. I'm Thomas Reed. I'm Karen's husband." The guard's face didn't change. "I'm sorry, sir. I can't let you in. You'll need to step aside." At first, I thought it was a mistake. Maybe Karen had accidentally forgotten to confirm my attendance. Maybe it was some clerical error. But then I saw her, standing a few feet away with her mother, Vivian. They weren't rushing to explain the misunderstanding or vouch for me. Instead, they were laughing. The sight hit me harder than I expected. Karen, the woman I had promised to love and support, stood with a hand over her mouth, trying to stifle a giggle. Vivian didn't bother to hide her amusement, her head thrown back in a loud laugh. This wasn't a mistake. This was intentional. My throat tightened as I glanced at the other guests milling around, some watching the scene unfold. Whispers started to ripple through the crowd, and a few phones were raised, capturing this humiliating moment for posterity. I could feel my pulse in my ears, a dull roar drowning out the world around me. I wanted to shout, to demand an explanation, but I knew that would only give Karen and Vivian exactly what they wanted. More humiliation for me, their convenient scapegoat. So, I did the only thing I could. I straightened my shoulders, nodded to the security guard, and walked away. The drive home was a blur. My thoughts raced, replaying the moment over and over. How had it come to this? Karen and I weren't perfect, but I thought we were partners. Yet, this felt like something deeper, a deliberate attempt to degrade me, to show me that in her world, I was expendable. I parked the car and sat in silence, staring at the dashboard. My reflection in the rearview mirror looked foreign, stoic on the outside, but beneath that calm facade, a storm was brewing. I had been ignored before, brushed aside at family gatherings, and treated like an accessory at social events. But this was different. This was public, calculated, and cruel. Later that evening, Karen came home, the faint scent of champagne and roses clinging to her. She didn't seem surprised to see me sitting on the couch. "You didn't stay for the ceremony?" she asked, feigning innocence. I looked at her, searching for any sign of remorse, but all I saw was indifference. "You knew I wasn't on the list," I said evenly. She shrugged, her tone dismissive. "Mom thought it would be best to keep things simple. Lisa wanted an exclusive guest list. You understand, right?" I didn't respond. What was there to say? That night, as Karen slept soundly beside me, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The laughter, the whispers, the humiliation. It all replayed in my mind like a cruel loop. Something had shifted. This wasn't just about the wedding. It was about respect. Respect I realized Karen and her family had never truly given me. I promised myself that I wouldn't forget this moment. It wasn't just a rejection from a wedding. It was a rejection of me as a person, as a partner. And while I didn't know it yet, this was the beginning of the end. The days after Lisa's wedding were a haze of frustration and reflection. The humiliation I endured at the hands of Karen and her mother, Vivian, replayed in my mind constantly. But instead of an apology, Karen carried on as though nothing had happened. In fact, it seemed like the wedding had only added fuel to her social media frenzy. My wife was obsessed with curating an image of perfection, a glamorous, enviable lifestyle that was far removed from reality. Karen's days were consumed with uploading perfectly staged photos, showcasing high-end restaurants, designer clothes, and luxury events. Meanwhile, I was working long hours as a project manager, building a stable, honest career. I didn't mind that Karen came from a wealthier background, or that her family enjoyed luxuries I never could. What stung was her complete disregard for the sacrifices I made to support her lifestyle. I'd often come home from work to find her lounging in the living room, scrolling through her phone, her laptop open with online shopping tabs. Packages arrived daily, each one containing something new and expensive: shoes, handbags, jewelry. I'd ask, "How was your day?" She'd wave me off, barely looking up. "Fine." Lisa and I went shopping. Every conversation felt like a transaction, devoid of any real connection. One night, while I was reviewing project reports in my home office, I overheard Karen talking to her mother on the phone. "Thomas just doesn't get it," she said, her voice filled with irritation. "He thinks budgeting means saying no to a new pair of shoes. It's embarrassing." Vivian's response was muffled, but I caught the words "beneath us" and "just a phase." A phase? I clenched my fists, the sting of their words cutting deep. Was that how they saw me? As some temporary inconvenience, someone to tolerate until they could move on to something better? Their attitude toward me was reflected in the lavish events they attended. From charity galas to exclusive brunches, Karen and Vivian were regular fixtures in the city's elite social scene. I was rarely invited, and when I was, it was clear they preferred me to stay quiet and blend into the background. The few times I tried to engage, Vivian would cut me off with a patronizing comment, or Karen would steer the conversation back to herself. It was as though my accomplishments, my opinions, my very presence were an afterthought. I began noticing the stark contrast between our lives more acutely. Karen's Instagram feed was a highlight reel of extravagance. Her posing in designer gowns, sipping champagne with Lisa, and flashing diamond earrings that I hadn't bought her. Meanwhile, my own life was practical, grounded. I paid bills, planned for our future, and handled the day-to-day responsibilities that kept everything running smoothly. But none of that mattered to Karen. What mattered was appearances. One evening, after Karen had gone to bed, I scrolled through her social media out of curiosity. It was all there, the perfect facade. Caption after caption painted a picture of a flawless, glamorous life, grateful for this amazing family and all the blessings in life. My face wasn't in a single photo. Not one mention of me or my role in making those blessings possible. Instead, it was Lisa, Vivian, and Karen, smiling at fancy restaurants or lounging on pristine beaches, the captions dripping with self-satisfaction. The breaking point came when I stumbled across a video from Lisa's wedding. It had been uploaded by one of Karen's friends. The video showed me standing at the entrance of the venue, arguing with the security guard. The camera zoomed in on my confused expression as Karen and Vivian laughed in the background. The caption read, "When you don't belong at the VIP table, face with tears of joy, #awkward moments." My blood boiled. This wasn't just neglect or indifference. This was intentional, public humiliation. I closed my laptop and sat in silence, the weight of it all pressing down on me. Karen and I had once dreamed of building a life together, but now, it felt like I was a mere footnote in her pursuit of social validation. The contrast between our worlds was glaring, and for the first time, I realized just how far apart we had grown. I wasn't angry about her wealth or her family's affluence. I was angry that I had been reduced to a joke, a pawn in her quest for appearances. As I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, a thought occurred to me. How long could I keep living like this? Tension had a way of creeping into my marriage with Karen, slowly but relentlessly, until it became the defining feature of our lives. The more time passed, the more I noticed the distance between us. It wasn't just physical. It was emotional, intellectual, and even spiritual. Karen's obsession with maintaining her social status became all-consuming. Her days revolved around glamorous outings, orchestrated photo shoots, and endless conversations with her mother, Vivian, about the latest trends and upcoming events. And then, there was me, the husband who didn't quite fit into her picture-perfect world. It wasn't always like this. I remembered a time when Karen and I laughed together, dreamed together, and talked about building a life that was ours. But those days felt like a distant memory. Now, I found myself watching from the sidelines as she played a starring role in a life I didn't recognize. The tension came to a head one evening when Karen announced, casually and without preamble, that Lisa's wedding would be the event of the year. "It's going to be incredible," she said, scrolling through her phone as she reclined on the couch. Lisa's pulled out all the stops: celebrity chef, live orchestra, the works. I nodded, trying to engage. "Sounds impressive. Are we doing anything to help with the preparations?" Karen barely looked up. "Oh, Lisa's got it covered. Besides, you wouldn't really be involved in the planning. It's more of a family thing." I frowned. I thought I was family. Karen waved her hand dismissively. "You know what I mean." Her words stung more than I cared to admit. That was the thing about Karen. She didn't always need to say something outright to make her feelings clear. To her, I wasn't really part of her family. I was a convenient accessory, someone to pay the bills and provide stability while she pursued her curated version of perfection. As the wedding day approached, the cracks in our relationship became impossible to ignore. Karen spent hours on the phone with Vivian and Lisa, discussing every detail of the event. The guest list, the decorations, the menu. It was all carefully orchestrated to impress. I was rarely included in these conversations. When I tried to join in, Karen would brush me off with a quick, "Don't worry about it," or "This isn't really your thing." It wasn't just the wedding that caused tension. Karen's social media presence had become a point of contention as well. One evening, I glanced at her phone as she posted yet another picture of herself in a designer dress. The caption read, "Grateful for this fabulous life and the amazing people who make it possible." Amazing people? I couldn't help but wonder if I even made the list. The distance between us grew wider with each passing day. Conversations became strained, our shared laughter a distant memory. I felt like I was living with a stranger, someone more concerned with likes and comments than the man she had married. The final straw came during a family dinner a week before the wedding. Vivian was holding court, as usual, regaling everyone with tales of Lisa's extravagant plans. "This wedding is going to be talked about for years," she said with a self-satisfied smile. "It's a real family affair." I raised an eyebrow. "Doesn't seem like I've been involved much in this family affair." The table went silent for a moment before Vivian laughed. "Oh, Thomas, don't take it personally. This is Lisa's day. You're more of a behind-the-scenes kind of guy." "Behind the scenes?" Karen chuckled along with her mother, and I felt my stomach twist. It wasn't just what they said. It was the way they said it, as though I didn't belong. That night, Karen and I argued for the first time in months. "Why do you let them treat me like this?" I demanded, my voice shaking with frustration. "Like what?" Karen shot back. "They don't mean anything by it. You're just overreacting." "Overreacting?" I said, incredulous. "Karen, I'm your husband. I should feel like I'm part of your life, not some outsider." She sighed, exasperated. "You're making this into a bigger deal than it needs to be. Can't you just let it go?" Let it go. I didn't say anything else that night. What was the point? Karen had made it clear where her priorities lay, and I wasn't one of them. The tension between us was no longer something I could ignore. It had become the defining feature of our marriage, a constant, unspoken presence that colored every interaction. And as Lisa's wedding drew closer, I couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to reach a breaking point. The day of Lisa's wedding had finally arrived. It was all anyone in Karen's family could talk about for weeks. The high-profile guest list, the glamorous venue, the endless luxuries that only someone with Vivian's influence could orchestrate. For Karen, this was more than a family celebration. It was a chance to flaunt her status, to step into the spotlight and bask in the admiration of the elite. For me, it was something entirely different. I dressed carefully that morning, pulling on the tailored suit Karen had picked out for me months earlier. The memory stung now, as I realized it was more about how I'd look in photos than any actual consideration for me. Karen was already gone by the time I finished getting ready. She left early to help Lisa with last-minute preparations, though help likely meant sipping champagne and posing for pre-ceremony pictures. I followed behind in my car, my nerves building with each mile. After the tension of the past few weeks, I hoped that being present at the wedding might help bridge the growing gap between Karen and me. When I arrived at the venue, it was every bit as opulent as expected. A sprawling estate with manicured gardens, fountains glistening in the sunlight, and valets darting between luxury cars. Guests in designer dresses and tailored suits milled about, their laughter and chatter filling the air. I approached the entrance, where a stern-looking security guard stood with a clipboard. "Name?" he asked curtly. "Thomas Reed," I replied, offering a polite smile. The guard scanned his list, his brow furrowing. "You're not on here." For a moment, I thought he must have made a mistake. "That can't be right," I said. "I'm Karen's husband. I was invited." The guard's expression didn't change. "Your name isn't on the list. I can't let you in." I glanced around, searching for Karen or anyone who might vouch for me. That's when I saw them. Karen and Vivian standing a few yards away, watching the exchange with thinly veiled amusement. Karen turned to her mother and said something, and they both laughed. My stomach dropped. This wasn't a mistake. This was intentional. I tried to reason with the guard one last time. "Please, can you check again? This has to be an error." But his tone remained firm. "I'm sorry, sir. You need to step aside." As I moved away from the entrance, the reality of the situation hit me like a punch to the gut. Karen and Vivian had orchestrated this humiliation, reducing me to a spectacle for their amusement. To make matters worse, I noticed several guests looking in my direction, their whispers and sidelong glances making my humiliation complete. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a notification from social media. Curious and dreading it at the same time, I opened the app to find a live stream. The video was clear. Me standing awkwardly at the entrance, the guard denying me entry, and Karen in the background, laughing. The caption read, "When you don't make the VIP list. Face with tears of joy #awkward husband moments." My heart raced as I stared at the screen, my face heating with anger and shame. They hadn't just humiliated me in front of their friends and family. They had broadcasted it to the world. I turned and walked back to my car, each step heavier than the last. My hands gripped the steering wheel tightly as I drove away, my mind swirling with a mix of anger, sadness, and disbelief. How had it come to this? How had I gone from being Karen's partner, her confidant, to the butt of her jokes? That evening, Karen came home late, still glowing from the success of the event. "Why did you leave?" she asked casually, as though nothing had happened. "You know why," I replied, my voice colder than I intended. She shrugged, completely unfazed. "It's just a bit of fun, Thomas. Don't take everything so seriously." I stared at her, searching for some trace of guilt or remorse, but there was none. She didn't care. Not about the humiliation, not about my feelings, not about us. That night, I lay awake, replaying the day's events in my mind. The laughter, the whispers, the live stream. It all felt like a cruel joke at my expense. But more than that, it felt like a turning point. This wasn't just about the wedding. It was about respect, or rather, the lack of it. Karen and her family had shown me exactly how they saw me, and it was a truth I couldn't ignore. I didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain. Something had to change. The morning after the wedding humiliation, I woke up to the relentless buzzing of my phone. At first, I thought it might be work, but as I unlocked the screen, my heart sank. Social media notifications flooded in, tags, comments, and messages, all stemming from that live stream. Karen's fun, at my expense, had gone viral. Strangers I'd never met weighed in on my life, turning my humiliation into their entertainment. I scrolled through the comments, each one more cutting than the last. Imagine being so pathetic your own wife doesn't want you at the wedding. This guy seriously thought he was VIP material? Face with tears of joy. Karen deserves better. My chest tightened as I read them, the words cutting deeper than I expected. I wasn't just embarrassed anymore. I was furious. Karen had crossed a line, and now I was left to face the fallout. When Karen came downstairs, she was her usual self, calm, composed, and completely unaware of the storm she'd unleashed. "Morning," she said breezily, scrolling through her phone as she sipped her coffee. "Morning," I replied, my voice clipped. She didn't notice my tone, too absorbed in her social media feed. That was, until she came across the comments. "Oh," she muttered, her expression shifting ever so slightly. "People can be so mean online." I stared at her, incredulous. "Mean? Karen, They're mocking me because of what you and your mother did yesterday. She looked up, feigning innocence. What are you talking about? The live stream. The comments. The whole scene you orchestrated at the wedding, I said, my voice rising. Do you even realize how humiliating that was for me? Karen rolled her eyes. Oh, come on, Thomas. It was a joke. People are just overreacting. A joke? I repeated, my anger boiling over. You publicly humiliated your husband. How is that a joke? Karen sighed, clearly annoyed. You're being dramatic. If you can't handle a little harmless fun, that's on you. I clenched my fists, struggling to keep my composure. It was clear Karen didn't see, or didn't care about, the damage she had done. Harmless fun, I said, my voice steady but cold. You've turned me into a joke, Karen, and now I'm the one who has to deal with the fallout. She didn't respond, instead turning back to her phone. The backlash wasn't limited to strangers online. At work, my colleagues tiptoed around me, their awkward smiles and hushed whispers confirming they'd seen the video. During a meeting, one of them made a passing comment, trying to lighten the mood. Hey, Thomas, maybe you should try getting on the guest list next time, huh? The room erupted in laughter, but I sat there, stone-faced. It wasn't just the jokes, it was the pity in their eyes. Everyone saw me as the man whose wife didn't respect him, and it hurt more than I cared to admit. At home, things weren't any better. Karen continued to post her curated version of life online, ignoring the growing tension between us. She acted as though nothing had happened, brushing off any attempt I made to address the situation. But the worst part was the silence from her family. Vivian, who had been so vocal in orchestrating the wedding, had nothing to say about the fallout. It was as though they had washed their hands of me entirely. As the days passed, the online harassment only intensified. Karen's followers latched onto the narrative she had created, painting me as the unworthy husband who didn't belong in her glamorous world. I started receiving private messages, some taunting, others offering unsolicited advice. Maybe you should step up your game if you want to keep a woman like Karen. She deserves someone who can match her lifestyle. Each message was a reminder of how far things had spiraled out of control. One evening, as I sat alone in the living room, scrolling through the relentless barrage of comments, I realized something had to change. Karen's disregard for my feelings wasn't just a problem. It was the problem. For years, I had put up with her family's condescension and her obsession with appearances, convincing myself it would get better. But this wasn't something I could fix. Karen didn't respect me, and without respect, there was nothing left to salvage. The next morning, I made a decision. When Karen came downstairs, I handed her the laptop, open to a page full of comments from her followers. Read these, I said, my tone firm. She glanced at the screen, her expression unreadable. This is what your harmless fun has done, I continued. You've made me a target, Karen. And for what? To entertain your audience? She looked at me, for once at a loss for words. I'm done, I said simply. I won't be part of this anymore. I left the house that day with a sense of clarity I hadn't felt in years. For the first time, I realized I didn't need Karen's approval, or her family's, for validation. The backlash had been painful, but it had also been eye-opening. It was time to reclaim my dignity and focus on what truly mattered, rebuilding my life on my terms. The morning after my declaration, the house felt unusually quiet. Karen hadn't said much when I walked out the door the previous day, and I suspected she was still trying to process the situation. For once, I didn't care what she thought. My mind was focused on one thing, moving forward without her chaos weighing me down. But just as I was settling into the idea of reclaiming my peace, everything began to unravel, for Karen and her family. It started with a knock on my office door during lunch. Jeff, one of my coworkers, peeked in with a hesitant expression. Hey, Thomas, have you seen this? He asked, sliding his phone across the desk. I looked down to see an article on a local gossip blog. The headline read, Reed Wedding Fallout, Behind the Scenes of a Social Media Disaster. My stomach twisted as I skimmed the article. It wasn't just about the wedding. It was a full expose on Karen's family, detailing their superficiality and the facade they had built over the years. Apparently, The wedding fiasco had caught the attention of a journalist who dug deeper into their lives. The article revealed how Vivian and Lisa had inflated their social status by exaggerating wealth, relying on loans and credit cards to maintain appearances. Karen wasn't spared either. Her social media posts were dissected, exposing the stark contrast between her curated life and reality. I should have felt vindicated, but instead, I felt nothing. It was a hollow victory, watching their carefully constructed world crumble under the weight of their lies. Later that evening, I returned home to find Karen and Vivian in the living room. Vivian's usual confidence was gone, replaced by a look of desperation. Karen's face was streaked with tears, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. "We need to talk," Karen said, her voice trembling. I stood in the doorway, arms crossed. "About what?" Vivian jumped in, her tone frantic. "This article is ruining us, Thomas. Everyone's talking about it. Lisa's sponsorship deals are falling through, and people are canceling collaborations with Karen. The wedding fallout has become a PR nightmare." I raised an eyebrow. "And what does this have to do with me?" Karen stepped forward, her voice cracking. "Thomas, please. You're good at damage control. You can help us fix this." I couldn't help but laugh. "Fix this? Karen, you and your family have spent years treating me like an afterthought. You humiliated me in front of your friends, your family, and the entire internet. And now you want my help?" Vivian interjected, her tone sharp. "We didn't mean for it to go this far. It was all just miscommunication." "Miscommunication?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You orchestrated my public humiliation. That wasn't a miscommunication. It was deliberate." Karen broke down, tears streaming down her face. "I made a mistake, okay? I didn't think it would end like this. I didn't think." "You didn't think," I interrupted. "That's the problem, Karen. You never thought about how your actions would affect me. And now that your perfect little world is falling apart, you expect me to clean up your mess." She opened her mouth to respond but stopped, realizing there was nothing she could say to justify her actions. The fallout extended beyond their social circles. Vivian revealed that creditors were calling, demanding repayment for the loans used to fund Lisa's extravagant wedding. The vendors were threatening lawsuits after not receiving full payment. "Thomas," Vivian pleaded, "you have connections. You could talk to them, negotiate something." I shook my head. "No, Vivian. You and your family made this mess, and you'll have to deal with the consequences. I'm done being the person you walk all over whenever it's convenient." The desperation in the room was palpable. Karen looked at me, her expression a mix of regret and helplessness. "I'll do better," she said softly. "I'll make this right. Please, just don't give up on us." I stared at her, searching for sincerity in her words. But all I saw was someone grasping at straws, trying to salvage a life that had already fallen apart. "I gave you everything, Karen," I said, my voice steady. "My support, my loyalty, my love. And you threw it all away. I'm not giving up on us. You already did." That night, I packed a small bag and left the house. I didn't slam the door or make a scene. I simply walked away, leaving Karen and Vivian to deal with the wreckage they had created. As I drove to a hotel, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. For the first time in years, I wasn't weighed down by their expectations or their toxic behavior. The fallout from the wedding had exposed the truth about Karen and her family, and it was clear they were more concerned with saving face than making amends. But I wasn't their scapegoat anymore. I thought I had seen the worst of it. The humiliation at the wedding, the social media fallout, and Karen's hollow apologies were enough to make me believe that nothing else could shock me. But as I moved forward, trying to put distance between myself and her family's chaos, I stumbled upon truths that made everything I'd endured seem like the tip of the iceberg. It started with an unexpected phone call. "Thomas," a voice said hesitantly, "this is Melissa, Lisa's former event planner." I frowned. "Former?" "Yes," she sighed. "I resigned after the wedding fiasco, but I wanted to reach out because, well, you deserve to know what really went on behind the scenes." I gripped the phone tighter. "Go on." Melissa proceeded to unravel a tangled web of deceit and manipulation. She told me about the lavish expenses for Lisa's wedding, expenses that Karen and Vivian had justified as necessary to maintain their image. But what struck me most was how these expenses were funded. The money didn't come from Vivian, Melissa revealed. Karen borrowed against your joint accounts. She didn't tell you? My stomach churned. Karen had drained our savings to fund a spectacle that I wasn't even allowed to attend. The more Melissa shared, the clearer the picture became. Karen and Vivian had been living beyond their means for years, using loans, credit cards, and shady financial maneuvers to maintain their illusion of wealth. But what really made my blood boil was Melissa's next revelation. I overheard something during the wedding preparations, she said, her voice hesitant. Karen and Vivian were laughing about you. They said you were too simple to understand how money worked and that you'd never notice if they used your funds. Her words hit me like a freight train. That evening, I returned to the house, not to reconcile, but to confront Karen and demand answers. She was sitting in the living room, scrolling through her phone as if nothing had happened. Vivian wasn't there, and for that, I was grateful. We need to talk, I said, my voice cold. Karen looked up, surprised by my tone. What's wrong now? I threw the bank statements on the table in front of her. Care to explain this? She glanced at the papers, her face paling as realization set in. Thomas, I can. Don't, I snapped. Don't lie to me. Melissa already told me everything. You drained our accounts to fund your sister's wedding. And you thought I wouldn't notice? Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. It wasn't like that, she stammered. We were going to pay it back. You know how important appearances are to my family. Appearances? I said, incredulous. You sacrificed our future for appearances? Do you even hear yourself? She stood, her voice rising. You don't understand what it's like, Thomas. My family has expectations, and I had to meet them. You've always been content with your modest life, but I couldn't live like that. Her words stung, but they also confirmed what I had suspected for years. Karen didn't see me as an equal partner. To her, I was a means to an end, a convenient provider who could be discarded when I no longer served her purpose. You used me, I said quietly. Not just my money, but my trust, my love, everything. And for what? To impress people who don't even care about you? Karen's composure cracked. Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't feel any sympathy. The final blow came when I confronted her about the live stream and her mother's involvement. Was humiliating me at the wedding part of your grand plan too? I demanded. She hesitated, which was all the confirmation I needed. It wasn't personal, she said weakly. It was just fun. People like that kind of drama. I shook my head in disbelief. You humiliated your husband for social media clout. Do you even hear how ridiculous that sounds? Karen broke down, sobbing. I didn't mean for things to get this bad. I was just trying to keep up, to make things work. Her tears might have moved me once, but not anymore. I don't care about your excuses, Karen, I said firmly. You betrayed me, and you betrayed this marriage. There's nothing left to salvage. She looked up at me, desperation etched on her face. So that's it? You're just giving up? No, I said, my voice steady. You gave up on us the moment you chose your family's image over our relationship. I'm just accepting it. I packed the last of my things that night, determined not to look back. As I drove away, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Anger, sadness, relief. The betrayal had cut deep, but it had also given me clarity. Karen's actions had shown me who she truly was, and I refused to let her drag me down any further. It was time to start over, free from her lies and manipulation. It was almost a week after I left when Karen reached out to me. The silence had been deafening on her end. No texts, no calls, until my phone buzzed with her name on the screen. For a moment, I considered ignoring it, but something in me decided to pick up. Her voice was soft, almost hesitant. Thomas, can we talk? I sighed, leaning back in my chair. What do you want, Karen? She hesitated. I want to apologize. For everything. Part of me wanted to hang up right there, to shield myself from whatever manipulative tactics she might use next. But the other part of me, perhaps the part that once loved her deeply, wanted to hear what she had to say. Go on, I said curtly. I messed up, she began. I let my family's expectations get in the way of what really mattered. I hurt you, Thomas, and I don't even know how to begin making it right. Her voice cracked, and for a brief second, I thought she might actually be sincere. Is this about the money, Karen? I asked, cutting straight to the point. Or is it about your reputation falling apart now that everyone knows the truth? There was a pause. It's not about the money, she said quietly. It's about us. About how I took you for granted. How I let myself get so caught up in appearances that I lost sight of what we had. What we had. I repeated, incredulous. Karen, you didn't just take me for granted. You humiliated me, lied to me, and used me. Do you even understand the damage you've done? Her tears came in earnest then, her sobs barely contained. I know, Thomas. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I can't believe how far I let things go. I've lost everything, and it's my fault. Her words hung in the air, heavy with regret, but I couldn't let myself soften. Not yet. Karen, do you even understand what forgiveness means? I asked. It's not just about saying you're sorry and expecting everything to go back to normal. It's about taking responsibility for your actions, about actually making changes. And from where I'm standing, all I see is someone who's sorry because they got caught. She was silent for a long moment, and I could hear her steadying her breathing. You're right, she admitted. I haven't earned your forgiveness. And maybe I never will. But I need you to know that I'm going to try. I'm going to make things right, even if it's too late for us. For the first time, her words felt genuine. But that didn't mean I was ready to let her back into my life. Karen, I said, my tone softening slightly, I appreciate the apology. I really do. But you need to understand that this isn't something you can fix with words. You broke my trust, and that's not something I can easily get back. I know, she whispered. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry. For everything. I sighed, feeling a twinge of sadness despite my resolve. I hope you mean that, Karen. I really do. But forgiveness doesn't mean going back to the way things were. It means moving forward, separately. After I ended the call, I sat in silence, reflecting on everything that had led to this point. Karen's apology had felt sincere, but sincerity wasn't enough. She had made her choices, and now she had to live with the consequences. For me, the apology wasn't closure. It was confirmation that walking away had been the right decision. That night, I slept more peacefully than I had in months. Karen's apology, while appreciated, didn't change the fact that I had a new life to build. A life free from manipulation, humiliation, and toxic relationships. And for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful about the future. The day after Karen's apology, I felt a strange sense of peace. Not because her words had magically mended everything, but because I knew I was no longer tethered to her chaos. The weight of her manipulation and my constant attempts to hold our marriage together were gone, and in its place was a quiet clarity. For the first time in years, I focused solely on myself. I started small, tackling the things I had neglected in the wake of our crumbling relationship. My apartment, a temporary refuge after leaving the house, was bare and impersonal, but I began making it my own. A few framed photos, a comfortable couch, and a new coffee maker were simple additions, but they felt like steps toward rebuilding a life that was mine. Work became my sanctuary. As a project manager, I thrived on structure and progress, and throwing myself into my career helped me regain a sense of control. My coworkers, once hesitant to approach me after the wedding debacle, started treating me with a newfound respect. Maybe it was because I carried myself differently, no longer weighed down by Karen's dismissive comments or Vivian's judgmental stares. One afternoon, Jeff, the coworker who had shown me the article about Karen's family, stopped by my office. "Hey, Thomas," he said, leaning against the doorframe. "You seem different lately. Happier, maybe?" I smiled. "I guess you could say I've been doing some spring cleaning, clearing out the toxic stuff in my life." Jeff nodded, grinning. "Good for you, man. You deserve it." His words, though simple, resonated. For so long, I had felt like I was drowning in a sea of other people's expectations. Now, I was finally breathing again. I also began reconnecting with old friends, people I had lost touch with during my marriage. Karen had always discouraged me from maintaining those relationships, dismissing my friends as too ordinary for her taste. One evening, I met up with an old college buddy, Marcus, at a local bar. "You look good, man," Marcus said, clapping me on the shoulder. "Better than the last time I saw you." "Thanks," I replied, sipping my beer. "It's amazing what leaving a toxic situation can do for your sanity." Marcus chuckled. "Well, here's to new beginnings." We raised our glasses, the clink of the toast feeling like a symbolic moment. As the weeks turned into months, I noticed more changes, not just in my surroundings, but in myself. I started running again, something I hadn't done since Karen dismissed it as a hobby for people who can't afford gym memberships. The rhythmic pounding of my feet on the pavement became a form of therapy, a way to process everything I had been through. I also rediscovered my love for photography, dusting off my old camera and venturing out to capture sunsets, cityscapes, and candid moments of life around me. Each photo felt like a snapshot of my journey, proof that I was moving forward, one step at a time. Karen reached out a few more times during those months. Her messages ranged from apologetic to accusatory, depending on her mood. Sometimes she would beg for another chance, claiming she had changed. Other times, she would lash out, accusing me of abandoning her and refusing to take responsibility for her actions. I didn't respond to most of her messages. When I did, it was brief and to the point. "We're done, Karen. I wish you the best, but I'm moving on." The final message came one morning in early spring. "I hope you find happiness, Thomas," she wrote. "I'm sorry for everything." This time, I didn't feel the need to reply. Moving forward wasn't just about cutting ties with Karen. It was about redefining what I wanted for myself. I set new goals for my career, taking on more challenging projects and earning recognition for my leadership. I started traveling, visiting places I had always dreamed of but never prioritized. In the process, I met new people who valued me for who I was, not for the image I projected. One of those people was Clara, a photographer I met during a local art exhibit. She was vibrant, down-to-earth, and completely uninterested in social media clout or superficial appearances. Our connection was easy, unforced. Over coffee one evening, she asked me about my past. I hesitated, unsure how much to share, but her genuine curiosity made me feel safe. "I've been through some interesting times," I said, smiling wryly. She laughed. "Haven't we all? The important thing is where you are now." Where I was now, I realized, was a far cry from where I had been. That night, as I stood on my apartment balcony, looking out at the city lights, I felt a sense of contentment I hadn't experienced in years. Karen and her family had once dominated my life, their expectations and judgments shaping every decision I made. But now, they were just a chapter in my story, a chapter that had taught me valuable lessons about self-worth and resilience. Moving forward didn't mean forgetting the past. It meant learning from it, growing stronger because of it, and using those lessons to build a future that was truly mine. Months had passed since I walked away from Karen and the life we had built, or rather, the life I had sacrificed to maintain while she focused on appearances. In that time, I had discovered a sense of freedom and peace that felt almost foreign after years of living under the shadow of her family's expectations. This wasn't just a new chapter. It was an entirely new book. My days were no longer filled with the tension of trying to measure up to someone else's version of success. Instead, I woke up each morning with a sense of purpose that came from pursuing things that genuinely mattered to me. The apartment I had once considered a temporary refuge was now my sanctuary. I had filled it with pieces of myself, photos from my travels, mementos from new experiences, and the kind of cozy, lived-in charm that Karen would have deemed ordinary. For the first time, I felt like I was truly home. My career was thriving as well. Without the constant distractions and emotional drain of my marriage, I had thrown myself into my work, taking on ambitious projects that showcased my abilities. One particular project, a community development initiative I had spearheaded, earned me recognition from local leaders and opened doors to opportunities one hadn't dared dream of before. It wasn't just about professional success, though. It was about proving to myself that I was capable of greatness, regardless of what Karen or her family had thought of me. Then there was Clara. Our friendship had grown naturally over the months, evolving into something I hadn't expected but deeply appreciated. She had a way of seeing the world, and me, that felt refreshing and real. She didn't care about my past failures or the scars left by my marriage. To her, I was just Thomas, a man rediscovering himself, learning to laugh again, and finding joy in the simple things. One evening, as we walked along the waterfront, Clara turned to me and said, "You seem lighter these days. Happier." I smiled, feeling the truth of her words. "I think I finally am." Karen had reached out a few more times since her final apology, but I never responded. It wasn't out of anger or bitterness. I had simply moved on. Forgiveness didn't mean reconciliation, and closure didn't require a conversation. I had given her enough of my time, my energy, and my heart. It was time to reserve those things for myself and the people who truly valued them. One afternoon, I found myself scrolling through an online article about Lisa's wedding fallout. The headline read, "The Rise and Fall of Social Media's Perfect Family." It was a thorough exposé detailing the financial ruin, reputational damage, and personal struggles that had followed the wedding debacle. Karen's name was mentioned briefly, her image reduced to a footnote in her family's public implosion. I closed the tab, feeling no sense of schadenfreude, just a quiet relief that I was no longer part of their story. The true turning point came on a sunny Saturday morning. I was sitting on my balcony, sipping coffee and flipping through a travel magazine, when a thought struck me. I was free. Truly, completely free. I could go anywhere, do anything, and build a life that was entirely my own. That realization was both exhilarating and humbling. Over the next few weeks, I began planning a trip, a journey that would take me to places I had always dreamed of visiting but never prioritized. Clara, ever the adventurer, offered to join me for part of it, and I eagerly accepted. The trip felt symbolic, a physical representation of the emotional journey I had been on since leaving Karen. It wasn't about running away from the past. It was about embracing the future with open arms and an open heart. As I stood in the airport, boarding pass in hand, I glanced at my phone one last time. There were no messages from Karen, no lingering ties to the life I had left behind. I smiled, slipping the phone into my pocket and stepping onto the plane. The journey ahead was mine to define, filled with possibilities, growth, and the kind of happiness that comes from living authentically. Karen had once said I wasn't enough, but I knew better now. I was more than enough, and I didn't need anyone else to validate that. The world was waiting, and for the first time in a long time, so was I.